Continuous domain and range. Domain, you always scan the graph from left to right to identify the x values being used. When you write your domain, you always write it the way that the blue is set up. Left number is less than, x is less than the right number. Now you would use a less than or equal sign if there's no open circle on those numbers. And you will see in the examples what I mean. If you ever have negative infinity is less than x is less than infinity, this is one way you would see an answer, or you might see it as all real numbers. They both mean the same. Range, scan the graph from bottom to top to identify the y values being used. When you write your range, it's the bottom number less than y less than the top number. You always go bottom to top. You use an open circle, use less than. If there's a closed circle or there's no open circle at all, you would use less than or equal to. First example, you need to find the domain and the range of this graph. Remember, domain is left to right, range is bottom to top. Open circle means less than, closed circle or just no open circle at all is less than or equal to. So furthest to the left, I see that on the graph, it goes to -6 on the x-axis. That's furthest to the left that the graph hits on the x. And because there's a closed circle, it's less than or equal to, and then I put x. Furthest to the right, I see that the furthest to the right on the x-axis that this graph hits is 3. And because there's no open circle, it's less than or equal to 3. Then bottom. The lowest that the graph hits on the y-axis is -6. And because there's no open circle, it's less than or equal to. And I put the variable y since I'm reading the y-axis. The highest that it hits is at -1 on the y-axis. So I put less than or equal to -1. Less than or equal to because there's no open circle. So that is my domain and range. Next example. Again, domain is left to right, range is bottom to top. So furthest to the left, I see that I have an open circle at -4. Because it is an open circle, I use less than. And if you notice, furthest to the left, the x value is what I'm worried about right now, is -4. And then I put an x. Furthest to the right, I look at the x value of where this graph hits. Again, it's an open circle, so I know it's less than, and the x value is 5. Now for range, it's the lowest y value that the graph hits, which is at -2. Now since there is no open or closed circle, I always assume that this is a closed circle when you don't see it open there. So I'm going to put -2 is less than or equal to y. Then the highest y value that this graph hits, notice there's an open circle. So since it's open circle, I want to put less than, and the highest y value that it hits at is 5. So that is my domain and range. Next example. Again, domain is left to right, range is bottom to top. Furthest to the left, my graph hits on the x-axis at -3. And it is an open circle, so it's going to be -3 is less than x. Furthest to the right, it is a closed circle. And the furthest to the right that this graph hits on the x value, the x-axis, is 5. So I put less than or equal to 5 because it is a closed circle. Now on this one, it's bottom to top. But if you notice, it doesn't go up or down. It just stays at -1. So for my range, I simply put y equals -1. The reason I put y equals is because it's crossing the y-axis at -1. And it does not go up or down. All right, next example here. So again, domain is left to right, range is bottom to top. Furthest to the left, I notice there is an arrow. When you see an arrow, you cannot say the specific point that this graph ends because it continuously goes. Since there is an arrow, and it's going to the left, I'm going to put negative infinity is less to x. Then furthest to the right, again, I hit an arrow. And since I hit an arrow again, it's going to be infinity. So negative infinity is less than x is less than infinity. Or you might see your answer as all real numbers. Now the lowest that this graph hits on the y-axis is 0. So I would put 0 is less than or equal to y. The reason I use less than or equal to is because there is no open circle. The highest that this graph hits are arrows, and because they're arrows and they're going in the positive direction, I just put less than infinity. Now you might see an answer like this, but most likely you would see the answer without the infinity. So it'd be 0 is less than or equal to y. All you do is erase the side that had the infinity. Or if you completely flip it, you must flip the symbol too, and it's y is greater than or equal to 0. Notice that the greater than is open to the y no matter which way I flipped it. So that is my domain and range. Next example. So domain is left to right, range is bottom to top. Furthest to the left, I hit an arrow, and since it's going in the negative direction, it is a negative infinity. So I put negative infinity is less than x. Furthest to the right, my graph stops at 0 on the x-axis. And because there's no open circle and there is no arrow, I would put less than or equal to 0. From bottom to top, the lowest that the graph hits is also 0 on the y-axis. And because there's no open circle, I would put 0 is less than or equal to y. And the highest that it hits is an arrow. And since it's hitting the arrow in the positive direction on the y, it would be less than infinity. Now again, you would most likely see your answers without the infinities, so I would write my answer taking away the part with infinity. So it'd be x is less than or equal to 0. On the bottom, it would be 0 is less than or equal to y, or you can flip the entire problem, and it would be y is greater than or equal to 0. Again, the greater than symbol is open to the y on both sides, so if you flip it, make sure you flip the symbol. Last example. Again, it's left to right for domain, bottom to top for range. So furthest to the left, the graph hits on the x-axis at 0. And because there's no open circle, I would put less than or equal to x. Furthest to the right, I hit arrows on both the top and the bottom on the right side. So furthest to the right, since there's arrows, and it's going in the positive x direction, it would be less than infinity. Now on the bottom, the lowest I hit is an arrow, and since it's in the negative direction, its negative infinity is less than y. Then on the top, I hit an arrow again, so it's going to be less than infinity. So up top, I take away the infinity, and I have 0 is less than or equal to x, or you can flip the entire thing, and it's x is greater than or equal to 0. On the bottom, it would be negative infinity is less than y is less than infinity, or you might see your answer as all real numbers. Either one would be an appropriate answer.